The winding road, a ribbon of cracked asphalt, stretched before me, cutting through the desolate, rolling hills of the Transylvanian countryside. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised indigo, streaked with the fading embers of twilight. My aging Opel, its engine wheezing like an asthmatic dog, struggled against the steep inclines and biting wind. I was late, desperately late, for a business meeting in a remote village, and the thought of facing my impatient clients filled me with a cold dread. As I rounded a sharp bend, I saw her. A lone figure, shrouded in a threadbare shawl, her silhouette stark against the darkening sky. A light mist clung to the valleys, adding an eerie, almost spectral quality to the landscape. I hesitated, my foot hovering over the brake. Common sense screamed at me to keep driving, to ignore the solitary figure by the roadside. But a flicker of empathy, a memory of my own grandmother, frail and alone, tugged at my conscience. I pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. As I rolled down the window, the wind whipped my hair across my face, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The woman looked up, her face gone, her eyes shadowed, yet holding a desperate plea. "Please," she rasped, her voice hoarse, a hint of an unfamiliar accent. "Please, sir, can you give me a lift?" I hesitated, the memory of countless cautionary tales flashing through my mind. "Where to?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The village of Borgia," she replied, her voice a mere whisper, her eyes darting nervously towards the dense forest that bordered the road. Borgia? That was on my route. Reluctantly, I nodded. "Hop in," I said, trying to ignore the prickle of unease that had suddenly taken root in my gut. She climbed into the passenger seat, her movements slow and deliberate. The car, already cramped, felt even smaller with her presence. She smelled of damp wool and something faintly metallic, like old coins. As we pulled away from the side of the road, I stole a glance at her. Her face was gaunt, her skin pale, almost translucent. Her eyes, though shadowed, held a strange intensity, a burning hunger that made me shiver. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You are very kind." I forced a smile. "Don't mention it." But the unease I felt earlier had morphed into something far more sinister. A dread that coiled around my heart, threatening to suffocate me. I tried to make conversation, to break the suffocating silence, but my words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and meaningless. She didn't respond, just stared out the window, her gaze fixed on the dense, ancient forest that lined the road. As the hours passed, the silence grew heavier, more oppressive. The mist thickened, obscuring the already dim light. I glanced at her again, and this time, I saw it. A glint of something in her eyes, something dark and predatory. It was like a predator sizing up its prey, a chilling realization that sent a wave of terror crashing over me. I tried to find an excuse to stop, to get away from her, but the nearest village was miles away, and the road ahead stretched out like an endless, desolate ribbon. I was trapped. Suddenly, she leaned forward, her breath cold and stale against my ear. "You know," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss, "I've been waiting for a long time." Terror seized me. I tried to swerve, to regain control of the car, but she was too quick. She grabbed the steering wheel, wrenching it violently to the side. The car skidded, tires screaming, before plunging off the road and into a deep ditch. The world exploded into a cacophony of shattering glass and screeching metal. I felt a searing pain in my shoulder, a jolt of agony that nearly knocked me unconscious. When I finally regained my senses, I found myself trapped, the seatbelt digging into my chest. The car was tilted precariously on its side, the mist swirling in through the shattered windows. I looked over at her, and the sight that met my eyes filled me with a terror that ran deeper than mere fear. Her face was contorted into a grotesque mask of rage, her eyes burning with a malevolent light. She was no longer the desperate, downtrodden woman I had picked up from the side of the road. She was something else entirely, something ancient and hungry. She reached for me, her fingers long and clawed, her grip like ice. I screamed, a raw, animalistic sound that was swallowed by the swirling mist. I tried to fight back, to wriggle free, but she was too strong. Her grip tightened, her fingers digging into my flesh. Then, a sound. A distant siren, echoing through the hills. It was faint, barely audible above the wind, but it was there. A flicker of hope, a spark of defiance, ignited within me. I mustered all my remaining strength and kicked out, aiming for her face. She let out a guttural scream, her grip loosening for a fraction of a second. I seized the opportunity, wriggling free and scrambling out of the wreckage. I stumbled through the undergrowth, my injured shoulder throbbing, my lungs burning. I could hear the siren growing louder, closer. I stumbled towards the sound, my legs heavy, my body trembling. Finally, I saw it. A police car, its lights flashing, approaching through the mist. I collapsed at the side of the road, gasping for breath, pointing towards the overturned car. The police arrived, their faces etched with concern. They pulled me into the warmth of the patrol car, wrapping me in a blanket. I told them everything, my voice trembling, the fear still clinging to me like a shroud. They listened intently, their faces grim. They found her inside the car, her face contorted in a grotesque snarl. She was gone, vanished into the mist. The police officers exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock and disbelief. They told me later that they had been investigating a series of disappearances in the region, particularly of lone travelers. They suspected a connection, a pattern. They said I was lucky, incredibly lucky. I was discharged from the hospital a week later, my shoulder in a sling, the memory of that night still fresh in my mind. I never learned if they ever found out who she was, or what drove her to such horrific acts. The only thing I know for sure is that I will never forget the night I picked up a hitchhiker in the Transylvanian hills, the night that changed my life forever. The fear still lingers, a constant companion, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the world. I am always looking over my shoulder, always scanning the shadows, always wary of strangers. The memory of her eyes, burning with a malevolent light, haunts me to this day. I will never forget. I will never forgive. And I will never, ever pick up a hitchhiker again, especially in those desolate, ancient hills,